The raw, untamed heart of Akita Prefecture beat in the frosty air of a late autumn morning in the year 1923. Deep within a humble, weathered farmhouse nestled amongst ancient cedar groves and fields still slumbering under a thin veil of frost, life was stirring. The scent of damp earth, rich with the promise of future harvests, mingled with the sharp, clean bite of pine resin from the surrounding forests. Inside, in the hushed warmth of a straw-lined whelping box, a new world was unfolding. A small, cream-colored bundle, no larger than a farmer's fist, squirmed blindly against the soft, warm flank of its mother. Its fur, a pale whisper against the rich red of its dam, was still damp from birth, clinging in tiny curls. This was Hachiko, though he was yet nameless, just one of a squirming pile of siblings, all vying for the life-giving warmth and milk. His nascent world was defined by instinct, the primal urge to feed, the comforting thrum of his mother's heartbeat, the soft nuzzle of a brother or sister, the gentle push and pull of tiny paws. The farmhouse was a symphony of rural life. Outside, the distant lowing of a cow carried on the crisp air, punctuated by the clucking of hens scratching in the yard. The wind, a constant companion in this northern land, sighed through the eaves, a mournful, ancient song. Inside, the sounds were softer, the rustle of straw as the mother shifted, the contented suckling of the puppies, the occasional whimper or sneeze. For Hachiko, these were the foundational notes of existence, sounds that brought a deep, instinctual sense of security. His eyes, when they finally fluttered open, were a milky blue, gradually deepening to the rich, dark amber that would forever hold the depth of his devotion. The world resolved itself slowly into soft blurs of light and shadow, the warm, indistinct shape of his mother, the wriggling forms of his littermates. He learned to push, to tumble, to nip playfully, his tiny teeth barely more than pins. He learned the distinct, earthy smell of his mother's fur, the sweet, milky taste of sustenance, the unique musk of his own family. The very air he breathed, cool and pure, seemed to imbue him with the robust spirit of the Akita breed, a blend of wildness and quiet strength. He was a creature of the earth, born from a lineage of proud, resilient dogs, his potential untamed, his future unwritten, a pure, innocent spark of life in the quiet heart of Japan. Each day was a revelation, a new texture beneath his paws, a new sound for his developing ears, a new scent to be investigated with a curious, twitching nose. The world, though small within the confines of the whelping box, felt vast and full of wonder. The gentle rhythm of the farm was abruptly shattered one brisk day. The familiar hands of the farmer, usually so kind, were replaced by a stranger's firm grip. Hachiko, still clumsy on his growing paws, was lifted, separated from the comforting warmth of his mother and siblings. A whimper escaped him, a small, lost sound, as he was placed into a wooden crate. The air inside smelled of raw timber and something metallic, unfamiliar and unsettling. The soft straw of his birth nest was gone, replaced by a rougher, colder surface. His apprehension mounted as the crate was jostled, carried through an alien landscape of bustling human activity. The clamor of the train station was a shock to his sensitive ears, a cacophony entirely unlike the gentle farm sounds. The piercing shriek of a train whistle tore through the air, vibrating through his very bones, sending a tremor of fear through his small body. The rhythmic clack-clack-clack of the wheels on the tracks began, a relentless, disorienting pulse that never ceased. He was a tiny, vulnerable being, tossed into a vortex of overwhelming new stimuli. The journey was long and arduous, stretching for endless hours that blurred into a continuous, rattling torment. Confined within the narrow wooden box, Hachiko braced himself against the ceaseless sway and lurch of the carriage. He could feel the vibrations deep in his belly, a constant reminder of his displacement. The air grew stale, heavy with the scent of coal smoke, damp clothing, and the unfamiliar odors of countless humans. Through the small gaps in the crate, he caught fleeting, bewildering glimpses of the world outside. Blurred streaks of green, then gray, then the dizzying rush of unfamiliar structures. Mountains gave way to sprawling plains, which in turn yielded to the encroaching sprawl of human habitation, a relentless march towards the unknown. Each turn of the wheel, each mournful cry of the train's whistle, seemed to pull him further and further from everything he knew, everything that was safe. His small heart pounded, a frantic drum against his ribs, as he longed for the familiar comfort of his mother's fur, the jostling warmth of his littermates. He sought stability, a firm anchor in this sea of motion and noise, but found none, only the relentless, clanking, inescapable journey towards a fate he could not yet comprehend. His vulnerability was absolute, his apprehension a constant companion. The journey eventually ended, not with a gentle deceleration, but with a jarring halt and a final, shuddering sigh from the great iron beast. The quiet that followed was almost as disorienting as the noise had been. Hachiko was lifted again, the crate now heavy with his own nervous scent, and carried through a labyrinth of new sounds and smells, the city air sharp and unfamiliar. When he was finally released, he stumbled, weak and disoriented, onto a soft rug in a quiet, unfamiliar room. The world spun for a moment, the floor beneath his paws feeling strangely unstable after the ceaseless motion of the train. He was ill, a deep weariness settling into his small frame, a feverish haze blurring the edges of his vision. But then, a new presence. A man, tall and gentle, with kind eyes and hands that moved with a surprising tenderness. This was Professor Hidezaburo Ueno, a professor in the agriculture department at Tokyo Imperial University, a man whose life was about to become inextricably linked with his own. The professor's scent was new, but not unpleasant, a clean, scholarly smell, mixed with something earthy and warm. He spoke in a low, soothing voice, words Hachiko didn't understand, but whose intent was clear. A soft blanket was offered, a bowl of warm, milky liquid presented with infinite patience. Hachiko, too weak to eat much at first, felt the gentle ministrations of the professor's hand, stroking his head, rubbing his small back. It was a touch that spoke of care, of quiet dedication. Slowly, painstakingly, the professor nursed him back to health. Days blurred into a gentle cycle of rest, nourishment, and soft, reassuring contact. The quiet comfort of this new home, the soft rustle of clean linen beneath him, replaced the harshness of his arduous journey. He began to associate the professor's presence with relief, with safety, with the slow, steady return of strength. It was during these quiet, healing days that he received his name, Hachiko. Hachi, meaning 8, a number considered lucky, and ko, a suffix often used for affection. The name felt like a warm embrace, a promise. He was no longer just a puppy, but Hachiko, a creature chosen, loved, and given a place. The profound sense of safety that enveloped him began to knit the first, fragile threads of an unbreakable attachment, a bond forged in vulnerability and nurtured by unwavering kindness. His frail body healed, but his heart, too, found a new anchor, a deep sense of belonging blooming in the quiet sanctuary of the Ueno home. As the seasons turned from the crisp chill of late 1923 into the burgeoning life of 1924, Hachiko blossomed. The frail, disoriented puppy transformed into a magnificent Akita, his cream-colored fur now thick and lustrous, his frame powerful and regal. His movements were fluid, confident, a testament to his renewed health and the robust spirit of his breed. His once milky blue eyes had deepened to a rich, knowing amber, reflecting an intelligence and an almost human understanding. The Ueno home, once a strange sanctuary, had become his undisputed domain, a place of profound comfort and joy. But it was his bond with Professor Ueno that truly defined his existence. Their connection had deepened into something profound, an unspoken language of mutual affection and understanding. Each morning, as the first rays of sun slanted through the shoji screens, Hachiko would stir, sensing the professor's awakening. The day began with a shared ritual. After a light breakfast, Hachiko would follow the professor to the bustling heart of Shibuya. The walk itself was a symphony of urban awakening. The air, still cool from the night, carried the faint scent of charcoal smoke from early morning fires, mingling with the fresh aroma of dew-kissed leaves from the neighborhood gardens. The streets, initially quiet, gradually filled with the rhythmic clip-clop of wooden geta and the hushed murmurs of early commuters. Hachiko, walking proudly beside the professor, his leash held loosely in the professor's steady hand, absorbed every detail. He learned the specific scent of each street, the distinct bark of a distant dog, the familiar faces of neighbors who offered a fleeting smile or a gentle pat. The sounds of Shibuya Station, even from a distance, were a familiar prelude, the distant rumble of an approaching train, the sharp hiss of escaping steam, the rising crescendo of human voices. Upon arrival at the station, a vibrant hub of activity, Hachiko would settle himself patiently near the ticket gates. The professor would offer a final, reassuring scratch behind the ears, a soft word, and then disappear into the stream of commuters, his silhouette fading into the throngs. For Hachiko, this was not a moment of abandonment, but a pause, a necessary interlude in their day. He would watch the professor until he was completely out of sight, then turn his gaze towards the tracks, an unspoken promise in his amber eyes. The hours of the day were spent in quiet anticipation. Hachiko would return home with Yae Ueno, the professor's wife, who also showered him with affection and care. But the true focus of his day remained the evening return. As the afternoon light softened and the shadows lengthened, Hachiko would grow restless. He knew the time. He knew the specific sound of the evening train that would carry his master home. With a quiet determination, he would make his way back to the station, finding his accustomed spot. The station, now bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun, transformed into a different kind of bustle. Tired commuters, their faces etched with the day's work, hurried past. The air was thick with the scent of steam engines, of bento boxes being opened, of roasting sweet potatoes from a nearby vendor. Hachiko, a still point in this river of humanity, waited. His gaze was fixed on the ticket gates, his tail a slow, hopeful pendulum. Then, there it was. The familiar gate, the distinctive silhouette, emerging from the crowd. Professor Ueno. An electric thrill would course through Hachiko. His tail would begin to wag furiously, his whole body trembling with suppressed joy. A soft bark of welcome, a joyous leap, and he would be there, pressing against the professor's legs, his head nuzzling into the familiar hand. The professor, a smile lighting his kind face, would always pause, offering a moment of shared, silent communion, a gentle scratch, a soft word of greeting. The walk home in the twilight, side by side, was a serene conclusion to their day, a quiet testament to their deep, unbreakable connection. Hachiko was content, secure, deeply devoted, experiencing the purest joy of routine and mutual affection. By the early months of 1925, Hachiko's daily ritual had become an integral, almost invisible, part of the Shibuya Station landscape. He was no longer a novelty, nor a stranger, but a familiar fixture, as much a part of the station's rhythm as the trains themselves. Each morning, his powerful, cream-colored form would trot beside Professor Ueno, their synchronized steps a silent testament to their bond. He would settle into his preferred spot near the ticket gates, his watchful gaze fixed on the stream of commuters, his internal clock ticking with the precise rhythm of the train schedule. The local vendors, their stalls overflowing with roasted chestnuts, steaming oden, and freshly brewed tea, had grown accustomed to his presence. Mr. Tanaka, who sold newspapers and tobacco, would offer a quick, almost imperceptible nod as Hachiko passed. Mrs. Sato, whose tiny bento stand filled the air with the comforting aroma of rice and grilled fish, sometimes tossed a small, carefully chosen morsel his way. The station staff, initially curious, now simply accepted him. They knew the Akita, knew his master, Professor Ueno, the kindly, scholarly man who always had a gentle word for them. Hachiko, in turn, recognized them. He knew the particular scent of the steam from the noodle shop, the sharp tang of the shoeshine man's polish, the cheerful chatter of the flower seller. He observed the endless parade of human faces, each one a fleeting glimpse into a different life, none as important as the one he awaited. He was a quiet observer, a calm presence amidst the ceaseless ebb and flow of humanity. His large, intelligent eyes missed nothing, yet his focus remained singular, unwavering. His presence was unassuming, a silent sentinel of loyalty. Commuters, rushing to catch their trains or hurrying home after a long day, might offer a fleeting glance, perhaps a soft murmur of, "Oh, there's the professor's dog again," but mostly, he blended into the background, an accepted part of the daily tapestry of Shibuya. He was not yet a legend, merely a beloved, albeit ordinary, dog, deeply integrated into his human-esque life, and by extension, into the life of the station. The seasons continued their predictable dance. Winter's crisp air gave way to the soft, gentle rains of spring, then the humid warmth of summer. Hachiko adapted with quiet dignity, his fur thickening in the cold, his panting a steady rhythm in the heat. He found shaded spots in summer, sheltered corners in winter, always maintaining his vigil, always with that serene, trusting expectation in his eyes. He was deeply content, secure in his routine, unaware of the impending, cataclysmic shift that would shatter his world and transform him from an ordinary dog into an enduring symbol. The peace before the storm, a tranquil, rhythmic existence, was all he had ever known, and all he expected to continue. He was a creature of habit, of love, of perfect, unquestioning devotion, utterly unprepared for the chasm that was about to open in his perfectly ordered universe. The year 1925 dawned with the same predictable rhythm that Hachiko had come to cherish. Spring unfurled its delicate cherry blossoms, painting the Shibuya streets in shades of ephemeral pink, their petals drifting like gentle snow. Summer arrived, humid and heavy, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and the distant rumble of thunder. Each day was a mirror of the last, a comforting loop of shared moments, a world perfectly aligned with the steady pulse of Professor Ueno's life. Hachiko's devotion was a quiet, unwavering flame, burning steadily at the core of his being. He knew the professor's footsteps even before they reached the door, the specific cadence of his cough, the gentle rustle of his academic papers. Their bond was a tapestry woven with countless threads of routine, affection, and unspoken understanding. Then, without warning, the tapestry began to fray. It was late May, the air still sweet with the lingering scent of spring rain, but a strange stillness began to creep into the Ueno household. Hachiko felt it first, a subtle shift in the atmospheric pressure of the home, a tremor in the familiar foundations of his world. The professor had left for the university as usual, his hand giving Hachiko the customary scratch behind the ears, his voice a soft murmur of farewell. But as the hours passed, a profound unease began to settle over the Akita. The afternoon sun, usually a source of warmth and contentment as he dozed, now felt jarringly bright, casting restless shadows that danced mockingly on the tatami mats. He paced, his powerful paws patting silently on the wooden floors, a low whine vibrating in his chest. His senses, usually so attuned to the professor's imminent return, now only registered an absence, a gaping void where a familiar presence should have been. The scent of the professor, usually so vibrant in the home, seemed to thin, to dissipate, leaving behind only a faint echo. Yae Ueno, her face tight with an unfamiliar tension, moved through the house with a hushed, frantic energy. Her voice, usually light and melodic, was now a strained whisper, her eyes wide with a fear Hachiko could not comprehend but felt acutely. The evening descended, not with the usual joyous reunion, but with a chilling silence. The familiar sounds of the professor's return, the click of the gate, the gentle clearing of his throat, the soft tread of his shoes never came. Instead, the house filled with unfamiliar presences, hushed voices, the rustle of dark kimonos, the scent of incense, heavy and cloying, a smell associated with rituals Hachiko had never witnessed inside his home. He watched Yae, her face now streaked with tears, her body racked with silent sobs. Her grief was a palpable thing, a heavy cloak that smothered the air, making it difficult to breathe. He pressed against her, offering his silent comfort, but she seemed lost in a world he could not penetrate, a world consumed by an overwhelming sorrow. A profound internal tremor shook Hachiko. He sensed loss, an immense, unfillable emptiness, but the permanence of it remained an abstract, terrifying concept. Where was the professor? Why was the house so still, so full of sorrow? His world, once so predictable, had become a maelstrom of confusion and anxiety. He whined, a deep, mournful sound, his head cocked, listening, always listening, for the one sound that never came. The abruptness of it all was disorienting, a sudden tear in the fabric of his existence. He curled up near the professor's study door, his nose pressed against the wood, inhaling the faint, lingering scent of his master, a desperate attempt to hold on to what was slipping away. The following morning, the sun rose, indifferent to the profound shift that had occurred. Hachiko, driven by an instinct as old as time and a habit as deeply ingrained as his own heartbeat, stirred. Despite the lingering pall of grief in the house, despite the hushed voices and the strange, solemn visitors, his internal clock urged him forward. It was time. It was time for the professor to go to the station. He moved with a quiet determination, his steps leading him out the familiar gate, down the familiar streets. The morning air was cool, carrying the usual city smells, but to Hachiko, everything felt subtly wrong, out of tune. He arrived at Shibuya Station, his powerful frame moving through the early commuters, his amber eyes scanning the entrance. He found his accustomed spot near the ticket gates, the rough concrete cool beneath his paws. His tail, usually a lively pendulum of anticipation, now held a tentative, almost questioning sway. He waited. The morning rush unfolded around him, a vibrant symphony of human activity. The rhythmic clack-clack-clack of trains arriving and departing, the cheerful shouts of vendors, the hurried footsteps of students and businessmen, all these familiar sounds now seemed to mock his singular purpose. He watched the faces emerging from the ticket gates, each one briefly illuminated by the morning sun, each one a potential glimpse of his master. But the professor never appeared. Hours stretched into a timeless expanse. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp, distinct shadows, then began its slow descent, painting the station in hues of gold and amber. The crowds thinned, the sounds softened, the station workers began to prepare for the evening's final departures. Still, Hachiko waited. His posture remained patient, his gaze unwavering, fixed on the point where the professor always emerged. Hope, a fragile, persistent thing, flickered in his heart, warring with a growing bewilderment. Where was he? Why was he late? As the last train pulled away, its whistle a mournful cry in the deepening twilight, Hachiko remained. The station grew desolate, the vendors packing away their wares, the last commuters disappearing into the night. He was alone, a solitary figure against the vast, indifferent backdrop of the city. The setting sun cast long, lonely shadows that seemed to stretch infinitely, mirroring the emptiness in his own soul. He returned home that night, not with the joyful bounce of a dog reunited with his master, but with a quiet, heavy tread, his confusion deepening into a profound ache. He repeated this vigil for several days. Each morning, hope spurred him on. Each evening, bewilderment and a growing sense of desolation settled upon him. The routine, once a source of joy, had become a relentless cycle of expectation and disappointment. His ingrained loyalty, once a simple expression of love, now manifested as an almost desperate persistence, a refusal to reconcile the absence with his deeply held belief in his master's return. The world continued its ceaseless spin, oblivious to the singular drama unfolding in the heart of one devoted dog. The quiet, sorrowful days bled into weeks, and the Ueno household, once a haven of warmth and shared life, became a place of transition. Professor Ueno's wife, Yae, her face still etched with the raw grief of her loss, made the difficult decision to move away from Shibuya. The house, imbued with so many memories of her beloved husband, was too painful to inhabit. For Hachiko, this meant another upheaval, another severance from the familiar. He was sent to live with relatives of Professor Ueno in Asakusa, a district vastly different from the quiet, familiar streets of Shibuya. The journey itself, though shorter than his initial arrival in Tokyo, felt like a fresh wound. The new home, while not unkind, lacked the specific scent of the professor, the comforting resonance of his presence. The streets of Asakusa were unfamiliar, a labyrinth of narrow alleyways and bustling markets, the air thick with the smell of river water, cooking oil, and the cries of street vendors. It was a world that felt alien, a place where he did not belong. His psychological state was one of profound distress. He was a creature of habit and deep attachment, and his world had been violently uprooted twice in quick succession. The overwhelming need to return to his perceived home, to the place where his master should be, became an almost obsessive fidelity. He could not articulate it, but his heart cried out for the familiar, for the possibility, however faint, of reunion. And so, he escaped. The first time, it was a blur of instinct and desperate resolve. He slipped past a carelessly opened gate, his powerful legs carrying him through the unfamiliar streets of Asakusa. He navigated by an internal compass, an unerring sense of direction guided by memory and an almost mystical connection to his past. The journey was arduous, stretching for miles through the unfamiliar urban landscape. He dodged rickshaws, barked at by other dogs, his paws growing sore on the rough pavement. But he did not falter. His singular focus, an overwhelming need, drove him forward. He arrived back in Shibuya, panting, exhausted, but triumphant. He found the Ueno home, now silent and empty, its windows dark. The scent of the professor was almost entirely gone, replaced by the faint, dusty smell of disuse. He nudged the gate, whined at the door, but there was no response, only the hollow echo of his own desperation. His heart, still clinging to the hope of his master's return, pulled him instinctively towards the station. He had to be there. The professor would come. He was found by passers-by, looking disheveled and lost, and eventually returned to the Asakusa relatives. But he escaped again, and again. Each time, the journey was a testament to his unwavering will, his desperate, almost frantic search for the anchor of his existence. The unfamiliar streets of Asakusa contrasted sharply with the comfort of Shibuya, highlighting his profound displacement. His repeated escapes were not acts of rebellion, but a visceral expression of his deep-seated need, a fidelity that transcended distance and logic. He was a creature caught between two worlds, driven by a love that would not be denied, a love that would not accept absence as permanence. It was in the early months of 1926 that Kikuzaburo Kobayashi, Professor Ueno's former gardener, a man with a kind heart and a deep respect for both the professor and his loyal Akita, took Hachiko in. Kobayashi-san lived near Shibuya Station, in a small, unassuming house with a modest garden, a place that offered Hachiko a semblance of stability. He was fed, sheltered, and cared for with gentle hands. The scent of Kobayashi-san was familiar, a faint echo of the professor's home, offering a fragile comfort. Yet, despite the kindness and comfort he received, Hachiko's daily pilgrimage to Shibuya Station continued, unwavering. Each morning, as the first light touched the rooftops, he would slip out, his powerful strides carrying him towards the familiar entrance. He no longer went to the Ueno home first. His internal compass now pointed directly to the station, the nexus of his enduring hope. He knew the specific train the professor always took, the one that arrived in the early evening. And so, he waited. The station staff and local vendors, who had witnessed his early days with the professor, now watched Hachiko with a mixture of curiosity, exasperation, and a dawning understanding. Initially, some found him a nuisance. "Shoo, dog, you'll get underfoot," a station attendant might call out, waving a broom. Hachiko would simply shift, maintaining his distance, but never breaking his vigil. He learned to avoid the more aggressive shooing, to find a spot that offered both visibility and a measure of peace. But slowly, over time, the irritation began to soften into something else. Sato, the bento vendor, would sometimes leave a small piece of chicken or a bit of rice near his usual spot. Tanaka, the newspaper seller, would offer a gruff, but not unkind, "Still waiting, eh, Hachi?" His presence, once simply noted, now began to evoke a quiet empathy. They remembered the kindly professor, and seeing his dog, day after day, waiting for a master who would never return, stirred something profound within them. The seasons cycled through again. The biting winds of winter, the gentle warmth of spring, the oppressive humidity of summer, the crisp, golden days of autumn. Hachiko endured them all. He found shelter under the eaves of the station, tucked himself into corners, his thick fur offering some protection against the elements. He would sometimes be seen shivering in the cold rain, his cream-colored coat matted, but his gaze remained fixed on the ticket gates, his hope an unyielding ember within him. His psychological state was one of unwavering resolve. He was hopeful, enduring minor hardships with a stoic dignity, his focus singular and unyielding. The world around him might change, people might come and go, but his purpose remained absolute. He was a sentinel of loyalty, a living testament to a bond that death could not sever. He was fed, he was sheltered, but his heart remained irrevocably tied to the ghost of a routine, to the unwavering belief that one day, the familiar figure of Professor Ueno would emerge, and their world would be whole again. The growing curiosity of those around him was a mere ripple in the vast ocean of his devotion. By 1927, Hachiko's persistent waiting had transformed him from a familiar local sight into a distinct fixture at Shibuya Station. He was no longer just the professor's dog, he was the dog who waited. His cream-colored fur, once pristine, now showed the early signs of wear from constant exposure to the elements. There were matted patches, a slight dullness to its sheen, and his powerful frame, while still robust, carried a subtle weariness that hadn't been there before. His eyes, though still bright with unwavering hope, sometimes held a deeper, almost ancient sadness. The general public, the endless stream of commuters, still largely remained unaware or dismissive of the profound purpose behind his vigil. To many, he was simply a stray dog, albeit a well-behaved and unusually persistent one. Some, particularly those new to the area, found him a nuisance. "Why doesn't someone just take that dog home?" they might mutter, annoyed by his quiet, unmoving presence that sometimes impeded their hurried path. Children, however, were often drawn to him, their small hands reaching out to pat his head, their innocent eyes seeing only a beautiful, gentle creature. The station staff and longtime vendors, however, had developed a complex relationship with him. Their initial irritation had, for most, softened into a grudging respect, then into a quiet admiration. They had seen him through scorching summers, where he would pant patiently in a sliver of shade, and through bitter winters, where his fur would be dusted with snow, yet his gaze remained fixed. Tanaka, the newspaper vendor, no longer shooed him away, but sometimes left a small bowl of water near his stand on hot days. Sato, the bento seller, would occasionally offer him a choice morsel, watching as he accepted it with dignified gratitude, never taking his eyes completely off the station entrance. The atmosphere around him reflected this evolving sentiment. It was often indifferent, the vast majority of people rushing past without a second thought. But there were moments, fleeting and profound, where it softened. A commuter, catching sight of his patient posture, might pause, a flicker of empathy crossing their face. A small group might gather, whispering about the loyal dog, their voices hushed with a dawning sense of wonder. The changing seasons were a relentless test of Hachiko's resolve. The cold winds of autumn, carrying the crisp scent of burning leaves, would whip around the station plaza, making his fur ripple. The winter snows, soft at first, then heavy and relentless, would blanket the ground, turning the station into a silent, white expanse. Hachiko would find what shelter he could, huddling against a wall, his body a stoic mound against the biting chill, his breath misting in the frigid air. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, heating the asphalt, making the air shimmer. He would seek out the sparse shade of a pillar or a vendor's awning, his tongue lolling, his chest heaving, but he never abandoned his post. Despite the physical discomfort, the hunger, the occasional shooing, Hachiko remained resilient, stoic. His emotional anchor was unbreakable, rooted in the deep longing that underlay his calm demeanor. He was not just waiting, he was believing. Believing that his master, Professor Ueno, would one day emerge from the stream of commuters, his kind eyes lighting up at the sight of his loyal companion. This profound, unspoken hope was his sustenance, his shelter, his unwavering purpose in a world that had, for him, lost its most vital anchor. He was a quiet, enduring presence, a testament to a fidelity that defied the passage of time and the finality of death, a silent, living monument to love. The years continued their relentless march, each one adding a new layer of resilience and a subtle shade of weariness to Hachiko's magnificent form. By the dawn of 1928, the cream-colored fur that had once been so lustrous was now often matted by rain or dust, and a few silver strands began to appear around his muzzle. His powerful frame, though still imposing, moved with a slightly slower, more deliberate cadence. He was an older dog, his body bearing the quiet scars of countless seasons spent exposed to the elements, but his spirit, the unwavering flame of his loyalty, burned as brightly as ever. The Shibuya Station, a constant in his ever-shifting world, continued its ceaseless, bustling rhythm. Trains arrived and departed with their familiar clatter and hiss of steam, commuters flowed in and out like a human tide, and the vendors' cries mingled with the general din. Hachiko, a quiet sentinel amidst this maelstrom, maintained his vigil. He still found his preferred spot, a familiar patch of pavement near the ticket gates, his eyes, now a deeper, more knowing amber, fixed on the stream of faces, searching for the one that never came. The station staff and local merchants, long accustomed to his presence, now treated him with a mix of resigned affection and quiet wonder. He was simply there, an immutable part of their daily lives, a living testament to a love they could not fully grasp, yet deeply respected. It was into this established routine that a new observer stepped, a man whose unique perspective would ultimately transform Hachiko's quiet dedication into a national legend. Dr. Yoshikazu Saito, a former student of Professor Ueno and a recognized expert on the Akita breed, had first heard whispers of the loyal dog of Shibuya through a casual conversation with an old university colleague. The story, initially dismissed as a charming but perhaps exaggerated local anecdote, had lodged itself in his mind, a persistent curiosity. Saito, a man of scientific rigor tempered by a profound love for animals, particularly the noble Akita, found himself increasingly drawn to the tale. He decided to visit Shibuya Station. His first trip was discreet, almost clandestine. He didn't want to disturb the dog or influence his behavior. He arrived in the late afternoon, blending into the homeward-bound crowd, his eyes scanning the platform. There, nestled against a pillar, was Hachiko. The sight struck Dr. Saito with an unexpected force. The dog was larger than he had imagined, his posture one of profound patience, almost regal in its stillness. His gaze was not darting or frantic, but fixed, unwavering, on the station entrance, a deep well of expectation in its depths. Saito observed Hachiko for hours that first day, and for many days that followed. He watched as the sun dipped below the city skyline, painting the station in shades of orange and purple. He watched as the crowds thinned, as the last trains departed, as the station lights flickered on, casting long, stark shadows. And through it all, Hachiko remained. He rarely moved, save for a shift of weight, a slow blink, or an almost imperceptible twitch of his ears, always listening, always waiting. The atmosphere around Hachiko was a fascinating study in contrasts. The bustling energy of the station flowed around him like a river around a stone, largely oblivious to his profound purpose. Yet, for Dr. Saito, the scene held a silent, profound drama. He saw not just a dog, but an embodiment of unwavering fidelity, a living sculpture of devotion. He noted the subtle interactions, the swift, kind hand of a vendor offering a morsel, the curious stare of a child, the hurried, unseeing glance of a commuter. He saw the dog's patience, his stoicism in the face of indifference, his quiet acceptance of the elements. Hachiko, for his part, registered Dr. Saito's presence as another quiet human among the many. This man, however, lingered. He didn't rush. He didn't shoo. He simply watched, a stillness in his own posture that was unusual among the hurried masses. Hachiko, ever watchful, categorized him as non-threatening, a part of the background noise of his vigil. He accepted the occasional gentle pats, the soft murmurs, but his internal world remained singularly focused. His gaze, a physical manifestation of his longing, never truly left the station gates. Saito, with his trained eye and empathetic heart, began to see beyond the physical act of waiting, sensing the deep, almost spiritual anchor that kept Hachiko rooted to that spot, a profound longing that transcended time and loss. He understood that he was witnessing something extraordinary, a story that deserved to be told, not just to a few local residents, but to the entire nation. The observations continued for months. Saito meticulously documented Hachiko's habits, his interactions, the subtle changes in his demeanor. He spoke to Kikuzaburo Kobayashi, Hachiko's current caretaker, learning about the dog's escape attempts from Asakusa, his unyielding return to Shibuya. He interviewed the station staff, the local vendors, piecing together the full, poignant narrative of Hachiko's 7-year vigil. The story, as it unfolded before him, was more compelling, more heartbreaking, and more inspiring than he had ever imagined. By 1929, Dr. Saito felt an undeniable urgency to share Hachiko's story with a wider audience. He knew that this was more than just an interesting canine anecdote. It was a testament to a profound, almost mythic loyalty that resonated deeply with the values of the Japanese people. He sat at his desk, the quiet hum of the city outside his window, and began to write. He chose his words with care, striving to capture the silent dignity, the unwavering hope, and the deep, abiding sorrow that he had witnessed in Hachiko's amber eyes. He crafted an article not merely as a scientific observation, but as a heartfelt tribute. The Asahi Shimbun, one of Japan's most respected national newspapers, agreed to publish his piece. On October 4, 1929, the article appeared, stark black and white print across the page, under the poignant headline, "A loyal old dog waits for his dead master for 7 years." The effect was immediate and profound. The rustle of the newspaper as it was unfolded over breakfast tables, on crowded train carriages, and in quiet tea houses, carried Hachiko's quiet story across the country. Readers, initially drawn by the intriguing headline, found themselves captivated by the simple, yet powerful narrative. Saito had not just reported facts, he had conveyed emotion, painting a vivid picture of the devoted Akita, faithfully awaiting a master who would never return. The article transformed Hachiko overnight. He was no longer just a local oddity, a curious fixture at Shibuya Station. He became a national symbol, a living embodiment of Chukin, the revered Japanese concept of loyalty. People read the words, their hearts touched by the dog's unwavering spirit. Tears were shed in countless homes as the story of Professor Ueno's devoted companion resonated deeply with cultural ideals of fidelity and perseverance. For Hachiko, however, the world remained largely the same. He continued his vigil, oblivious to the stir he was causing across the nation. The sun still rose and set, the trains still whistled, and the crowds still flowed. He felt no surge of fame, no understanding of the words printed about him. His internal state remained unchanged, anchored firmly to his singular purpose. He was still waiting, but around him, an invisible shift was occurring. Public perception of him was transforming from mere curiosity to one of widespread admiration and profound empathy. The silent, patient dog at Shibuya Station was no longer just a dog. He was Hachiko, a legend in the making, his story now woven into the collective consciousness of a nation. The stage was set for his quiet devotion to become a shared national experience, a poignant tale whispered from one generation to the next. The year 1930 brought with it an unprecedented surge of attention to Shibuya Station. The Asahi Shimbun article had struck a powerful chord, igniting a national fascination with Hachiko. What had once been a local anecdote, known to a handful of commuters and vendors, now exploded into a phenomenon. Shibuya Station, once merely a transit hub, rapidly transformed into a pilgrimage site, all because of one cream-colored Akita. Commuters and visitors, armed with newspapers and fueled by a fervent desire to witness the legend for themselves, flocked to the station. They came from all corners of Tokyo, and soon, from across Japan. The platform, once a place of indifference, now hummed with a different kind of energy, one of reverence and awe. People jostled for a glimpse of Hachiko, their hushed whispers and excited murmurs creating a constant, low thrum. The atmosphere was electric, a stark contrast to the quiet dignity Hachiko had maintained for so many years. Flashbulbs, a relatively new marvel, began to pop, momentarily illuminating Hachiko's patient face, then plunging the scene back into the soft glow of the station lights. Children, their eyes wide with wonder, pointed and tugged at their parents' sleeves. Adults, their faces etched with a mix of emotion, often wiped away a tear as they watched the dog's unwavering gaze fixed on the ticket gates. Hachiko, now accustomed to the ebb and flow of humanity, accepted this newfound attention with a calm, almost regal indifference. He didn't understand the cameras, the murmurs, or the sudden abundance of gentle hands reaching out to pet him. He simply tolerated it. His internal world remained utterly impervious to the external frenzy. His focus, his singular purpose, remained unchanged, a steadfast beacon in the swirling tide of human emotion. He was unswayed by the fame, his internal state still anchored to the hope of Professor Ueno's return. Donations and gifts of food poured in. Small bowls of fresh water appeared near his usual spot. Pieces of yaki imo, a favorite treat, were offered by kind hands. Station staff, who had once occasionally shooed him away, now protected him, guiding crowds away from his immediate vicinity, ensuring he had space to maintain his vigil. He was treated with reverence, a living monument to a revered ideal. Saito often visited, observing the transformation with a mixture of pride and quiet contemplation. He saw that Hachiko, despite the overwhelming attention, remained true to himself. The dog would accept a gentle scratch behind the ears, a kind word, but his eyes would always drift back to the station entrance, a silent question in their depths. The adulation, the veneration, the endless stream of admirers, it was all external. Hachiko's heart, his very being, remained steadfastly fixed on the one person who mattered. He was a calm, accepting presence, yet utterly focused on his singular purpose. The station, once a symbol of his quiet, personal sorrow, had now become a stage for a national outpouring of emotion, a testament to the power of a dog's unwavering love. His story had transcended the personal, becoming a mirror for the deepest aspirations of human loyalty. The national outpouring of admiration for Hachiko reached such a crescendo that by 1932, a powerful idea began to take root. Hachiko deserved a permanent monument. His living presence at Shibuya Station was already a legend, but a statue, cast in enduring bronze, would ensure his story resonated for generations to come. Saito, deeply involved in promoting Hachiko's legacy, spearheaded the initiative, garnering support from prominent citizens and raising funds from a grateful public. Teru Ando, an acclaimed sculptor known for his ability to imbue his works with profound emotion and lifelike detail, was commissioned for the monumental task. Ando Sensei, a man of quiet intensity and deep artistic sensibility, understood the weight of the responsibility. He knew he wasn't just crafting a likeness of a dog, he was attempting to capture the very essence of loyalty, the silent strength of Hachiko's devotion. The sculpture's workshop, typically a solitary space filled with the earthy scent of clay and the metallic tang of tools, began to hum with a new kind of creative energy. Sketches filled the walls, each one an attempt to capture Hachiko's posture, his gaze, the quiet dignity that defined him. Ando Sensei studied photographs, but he knew he needed more. He needed to observe the living legend himself. And so, Hachiko, already an icon, began attending sittings in Ando Sensei's studio. He would be gently brought from Shibuya, his powerful form moving with an accustomed patience through the city streets. In the studio, surrounded by the rough forms of nascent sculptures and the quiet focus of the artist, Hachiko would settle into a comfortable pose. He was a patient, dignified subject. He would observe Ando Sensei with mild curiosity, his amber eyes following the sculpture's hands as they worked the malleable clay, shaping it, coaxing it into familiar forms. The smell of the clay, rich and damp, was a new sensation, but not an unpleasant one. The sounds were soft, the scraping of a tool, the gentle murmur of Ando Sensei's voice, the distant sounds of the city. Hachiko, in his serene acceptance, embodied the very loyalty the statue sought to capture. He would lie there, often dozing, his dreams perhaps filled with the familiar face of Professor Ueno, while around him, the sculptor painstakingly recreated his form. Ando Sensei worked to capture the subtle droop of Hachiko's ears, the proud set of his head, the powerful curve of his back, and most importantly, the profound expectation in his eyes. He sought to imbue the bronze with the dog's soul, to convey the story of unwavering devotion without a single word. The public eagerly anticipated the unveiling. Newspaper reports detailed the progress of the statue, fueling a collective excitement. Fundraisers continued, with ordinary citizens contributing their meager savings, eager to be a part of this historic tribute. A sense of permanence and honor began to settle, not just around Hachiko, but around the very idea of his loyalty. The statue was not merely a memorial, it was a testament to a timeless virtue, a symbol of the enduring power of unconditional love. Hachiko, a living monument, was inspiring his own effigy, an icon in the making, destined to stand forever at the place of his unwavering vigil. The day of the unveiling, April 21, 1934, dawned crisp and clear, a perfect spring morning in Tokyo. An enormous crowd, far larger than any the station had ever seen, gathered at Shibuya. Dignitaries, prominent citizens, Dr. Saito, Kikuzaburo Kobayashi, and even Yae Ueno, Professor Ueno's widow, were present. The air thrummed with anticipation, a collective held breath. Banners fluttered gently in the breeze, and the scent of fresh-cut flowers mingled with the familiar aroma of steam and city air. And then, Hachiko arrived. He was led gently through the throng, his powerful form moving with a quiet dignity, his head held high. He was older now, his muzzle truly silvered, his gait a little slower, but his presence was as commanding as ever. He seemed to sense the momentousness of the occasion, accepting the hushed reverence of the crowd with serene composure. The ceremony began with speeches, eloquent tributes to Hachiko's unparalleled loyalty, to the enduring spirit of his devotion. Saito spoke, his voice filled with emotion, recounting the long years of Hachiko's vigil. Yae Ueno, her eyes moist, offered a silent prayer. The crowd listened intently, many wiping away tears, their hearts swelling with pride and a profound sense of shared humanity. Finally, the moment arrived. A large, heavy cloth, draped over the statue, was slowly pulled away. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a thunderous cheer. There it stood, magnificent and true, the bronze statue of Hachiko. It depicted him in his iconic pose, sitting patiently, his head slightly cocked, his gaze fixed eternally towards the station entrance, a perfect mirror of his living counterpart. The sculptor, Teru Ando, had captured not just his physical form, but the very essence of his unwavering spirit, the quiet strength of his devotion. Hachiko himself was led to stand beside his likeness. It was a powerful, almost surreal image, the living legend beside his immortalized self. He sniffed at the cold bronze, perhaps recognizing a faint, metallic echo of his own form, then settled beside it, his amber eyes, still full of their singular purpose, drifting instinctively towards the ticket gates. He was a quiet witness to his own apotheosis, his vigil unbroken even amidst the fanfare and celebration. The bronze Hachiko, gleaming in the morning sun, stood as a triumphant, emotional, and deeply symbolic declaration. It was a testament to an extraordinary bond, a beacon of loyalty erected at the very heart of the city. The cheers eventually subsided, replaced by a quiet, reverent admiration. The statue would forever gaze towards the station entrance, an eternal guardian of Professor Ueno's memory, a symbol that transcended the fleeting moments of the ceremony, cementing Hachiko's place not just in the history of Shibuya, but in the heart of the nation. His story, now cast in bronze, was truly immortal. The echoes of the triumphant cheers from the statue's unveiling gradually faded, absorbed by the ceaseless hum of Shibuya Station. The dignitaries dispersed, the crowds thinned, and the spring sunlight, once glinting off the newly revealed bronze, settled back into its familiar, everyday glow. Yet, the presence of the statue, standing sentinel at the station entrance, had irrevocably altered the landscape. It was a silent, permanent declaration, a bronze twin to the living legend who continued his vigil. Hachiko, now truly an elder statesman of loyalty, maintained his daily routine with an enduring, gentle grace. The year 1934 saw him, an older and undeniably frailer dog, still making his way to the station each afternoon. His muzzle was a snowy white, stark against his cream-colored fur, and his once powerful stride had softened into a more measured, deliberate pace. His joints, after nearly a decade of steadfast waiting, sometimes ached with the damp chill of a rainy day or stiffened in the morning cold. His breathing, though still strong, carried a slight, almost imperceptible wheeze on particularly humid afternoons. Yet, the light in his amber eyes remained undimmed, a constant flicker of hope that defied the relentless march of time and the irrefutable evidence of absence. The station environment, too, had subtly adapted to his revered presence. The initial frenzy that had followed Dr. Saito's article, and which had intensified around the statue's unveiling, had settled into a quieter, more profound admiration. Hachiko was no longer a mere spectacle, he was an institution, a comforting and inspiring sight for the legions of commuters who passed through Shibuya daily. They knew his story, whispered it to newcomers, and treated him with a reverence that bordered on the sacred. Children, their small hands often clutching miniature flags or brightly colored toys, would approach him with a mixture of awe and gentle curiosity. They no longer tugged at his fur or tried to startle him, instead, they offered soft pats, their voices hushed as if in the presence of a living deity. Adults, hurrying to catch their trains, would often pause, their hurried steps faltering, to offer a quick, respectful bow in his direction, or simply a moment of silent contemplation. His enduring presence was a poignant reminder of unwavering devotion in a world that often felt fleeting and transient. The station staff, who had once shooed him away, now acted as his unofficial guardians. Tanaka, the newspaper vendor, would often set out a fresh bowl of water for him, carefully placed near the base of the bronze statue, a silent offering to both the living and the immortal Hachiko. Sato, the bento seller, ensured he always had a small, choice morsel from her stall, watching with a soft smile as he accepted it with a dignified nod of his head. They spoke of him in hushed tones, their voices tinged with affection and a touch of melancholy, understanding that his vigil, however inspiring, was also a testament to a profound, unfillable loss. Hachiko, in his quiet resilience, was a constant. He would still find his favored spot, often now resting near the cool bronze of his own likeness, his gaze still fixed on the ticket gates. The smell of steam, bento, and the myriad human scents of the station were his world. He registered the rhythmic clatter of the trains, the announcements echoing from the loudspeakers, the endless ebb and flow of human voices, but his internal focus remained singular, unwavering. He was wearying physically, his body slowing, but his spirit remained steadfast, his loyalty undiminished by age or infirmity. Each day, as the sun began its descent and the station lights flickered on, he would settle in, his hope a quiet, persistent ember in the gathering twilight, waiting for the familiar silhouette, the beloved scent, the gentle hand that would never come again. His life had become a living prayer, a silent testament to a love that defied the finality of death. As the calendar pages turned into 1935, a subtle, yet undeniable, change began to manifest in Hachiko. The quiet weariness that had settled upon him in his later years deepened into a more pronounced frailty. His once lustrous cream fur, though still cared for by Kobayashi-san, now seemed duller, its thickness diminished. His movements became slower, each step a deliberate effort, and he spent more time resting, often curled up beside the cool, unyielding bronze of his own statue, as if drawing strength from his immortalized self. The sharp, intelligent sparkle in his amber eyes, while still present, was occasionally clouded by a distant, almost hazy quality, a sign of the physical discomfort that was slowly but inexorably claiming him. His appetite, once robust, waned. Kobayashi-san would bring him specially prepared meals, often coaxing him to eat, his heart heavy with the knowledge that Hachiko's time was drawing to a close. The station staff, the vendors, and the regular commuters observed these changes with a growing sense of foreboding. They had watched him for years, a symbol of unwavering life, and now, they saw the shadow of its inevitable end. Their casual greetings became softer, their pats more tender, their gazes lingering longer, as if trying to imprint his image forever in their minds. The bitter winds of March brought a final, cruel chill to Tokyo. On the morning of March 8, 1935, Hachiko, having made his usual, arduous journey to the station, collapsed. Not on the bustling platform, but in a quiet, secluded alleyway near the station, a place he sometimes sought for respite. His body, ravaged by years of exposure and the silent, internal battles against disease, finally gave way. He had succumbed to natural causes, later determined to be filariasis and cancer, silent killers that had slowly gnawed at his magnificent frame. His long vigil, spanning nearly a decade, had finally come to an end. The news spread through Shibuya like a silent, sorrowful ripple. A station attendant, making his rounds in the early hours, discovered him. The bustling station, usually a cacophony of sound and movement, seemed to fall silent in reflection, as if the very air held its breath in mourning. The vibrant energy that usually pulsed through its arteries was replaced by a somber quietude, a palpable sense of profound loss that rippled through the community that had adopted him as their own. Vendors lowered their voices, their usual cheerful cries replaced by hushed murmurs of disbelief and sorrow. Commuters, learning of his passing, paused, their faces etched with grief, many openly weeping. Saito, his heart heavy, arrived at the station. He knelt beside Hachiko, stroking the now still, cold fur, a silent farewell to the noble dog he had championed. Kobayashi-san, his eyes red-rimmed, stood by, his own grief a testament to the quiet bond he had shared with the loyal Akita. Hachiko had passed peacefully, his spirit finally released from its earthly tether, his long, unwavering dedication fulfilled. He was at peace, having completed his life's singular purpose, finally resting after years of unwavering dedication, his heart, at last, reunited with the memory of his beloved master. The quiet dignity of his passing, in the very shadow of the station he had graced for so long, seemed a fitting end to a life defined by loyalty. The death of Hachiko was not merely the passing of a beloved pet, it was a national event, met with an outpouring of genuine grief and mourning across Japan. Newspapers, including the Asahi Shimbun, that had first brought his story to national attention, ran front-page obituaries, their headlines proclaiming the loss of Chukin Hachiko, the loyal dog Hachiko. Radio broadcasts carried the somber news to every corner of the archipelago, and countless homes observed a moment of silent reflection. People who had never met Hachiko, who had only known him through newspaper articles and whispered legends, felt a profound sense of personal loss, as if a cherished national treasure had vanished. In an effort to honor his extraordinary legacy and to ensure his physical presence could be retained for posterity, a decision was made for Hachiko's remains to be treated with utmost respect and scientific rigor. His body was transported to the laboratory of the Department of Agriculture at Tokyo Imperial University, the very institution where Professor Ueno had taught. Here, his organs were carefully preserved for scientific study, a testament to the scientific curiosity that Professor Ueno himself had embodied. This meticulous process aimed to understand the physiological aspects of such a long and arduous life, providing closure and understanding to the scientific community and the public alike. But more than scientific understanding, there was a deep desire for a tangible link to the legend. Hachiko's fur was carefully mounted, a process known as taxidermy, by skilled artisans. The result was a lifelike representation, preserving his iconic cream-colored coat, his noble posture, and the gentle curve of his head. This mounted specimen, a poignant and powerful echo of his living self, was destined for the National Science Museum of Japan in Ueno, where it remains to this day. It allowed future generations to stand before him, to witness his physical form, and to connect with the incredible story of loyalty that had so deeply moved the nation. The atmosphere surrounding these actions was one of reverence, education, and deep sorrow. The scientific examination was not an act of cold detachment, but one of respectful inquiry into a life that had become so much more than just a dog's. The taxidermy was not merely a preservation technique, but an act of love, ensuring that the physical embodiment of Hachiko's spirit would continue to inspire. His physical remains were treated with the utmost respect, each step taken with a profound awareness of his significance. Hachiko, in death, became a posthumous symbol, his story now fully etched into the national consciousness, not just as a tale, but as a tangible presence. His passing, while deeply mourned, also solidified his place as an eternal icon, a powerful reminder of the enduring virtues of fidelity and unconditional love. The mounted form, gazing out with glass eyes that held a semblance of his former devotion, served as a silent guardian of his legend, ensuring that the memory of the dog who waited would never fade. The mourning for Hachiko was profound and widespread, but it was also accompanied by a desire to honor his memory in a way that truly celebrated his enduring bond with Professor Ueno. The most fitting tribute, it was universally agreed, would be to reunite them, not in life, but in the peaceful slumber of eternity. And so, in 1936, a year after his passing, Hachiko was laid to rest beside his beloved master. Aoyama Cemetery, a sprawling, tranquil expanse of green amidst the urban sprawl of Tokyo, became their final resting place. It was a place of quiet dignity, where ancient trees whispered in the breeze and gravestones stood as silent sentinels to countless lives. The air here was different from the bustling station. It was imbued with a sense of peace, of solemn remembrance. The sounds were softer, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the hushed footsteps of visitors. Hachiko's grave was modest, yet prominent, located directly beside Professor Hidezaburo Ueno's. This symbolic act of burial was more than just a physical placement, it was a powerful affirmation of their unbreakable connection, a final, poignant act of reunion. The dog who had waited for nearly a decade at a train station for his master was now, at last, joined with him, his vigil complete. The earth that covered them both held the weight of their extraordinary story, a testament to a love that transcended the boundary between species and the finality of death. The atmosphere at Aoyama Cemetery during ceremonies and visits was sacred, commemorative, and deeply emotional. Families, individuals, and even organized groups would come to pay their respects, not just to Professor Ueno, but to Hachiko. Fresh flowers, often kiku and other symbolic blooms, adorned their graves. Incense would be lit, its fragrant smoke curling upwards into the sky, carrying silent prayers and heartfelt gratitude. The quiet dignity of the cemetery, with its serene beauty, offered a profound contrast to the bustling, noisy station, marking a spiritual reunion that brought a sense of closure to a nation that had followed Hachiko's story so closely. His memory was honored with regular ceremonies, particularly on the anniversary of his passing. These gatherings were not somber affairs of pure grief, but rather celebrations of loyalty, perseverance, and unconditional love. Speakers would recount Hachiko's story, reminding new generations of his unwavering devotion. Children, brought by their parents, would listen with wide eyes, absorbing the powerful narrative that had become an integral part of Japan's cultural fabric. The continued public adoration ensured that Hachiko's legacy was not merely confined to history books but remained a living, breathing inspiration. Hachiko's psychological state, in this final resting place, was one of profound peace. His spirit, having completed its long, arduous vigil, was now at rest beside the one he had waited for. The longing that had fueled his daily journeys, the hope that had sustained him through years of absence, had finally found its resolution. He was joined with his master, the circle of his devotion complete, an eternal bond solidified in the quiet earth of Aoyama. His grave became a hallowed ground, a place where the enduring power of love was not just remembered, but felt, a silent testament to a fidelity that would inspire for generations to come. The legacy of Hachiko, though firmly established by 1936, was destined to face challenges and transformations, ultimately cementing his status as a global icon. The bronze statue, unveiled with such fanfare in 1934, stood proudly at Shibuya Station for a decade, a constant reminder of unwavering loyalty. But the world was plunging into the maelstrom of World War II, a conflict that demanded unprecedented sacrifices. By 1944, as Japan faced increasing shortages of raw materials, the unthinkable happened. The original bronze statue of Hachiko, along with countless other metal monuments across the nation, was melted down for the war effort. The bronze, once a symbol of devotion, was repurposed for armaments, a somber reflection of the era's brutal realities. It was a heartbreaking loss for a nation that held Hachiko so dear, a stark reminder of the war's pervasive reach. Yet, Hachiko's story had already etched itself too deeply into the Japanese consciousness to be erased by the destruction of a mere statue. As soon as the war ended and the nation began its arduous process of rebuilding, the desire to restore Hachiko's monument became a powerful symbol of hope and resilience. In 1948, just 3 years after the war's conclusion, a second, identical statue was erected at Shibuya Station. It was sculpted by Takeshi Ando, the son of the original sculptor, Teru Ando, who had himself tragically perished in the war. This act of recreation, of bringing Hachiko back to his post, was a profound act of national healing, a reaffirmation of enduring values in a shattered world. The new bronze Hachiko, gleaming under the post-war sun, once again gazed towards the station entrance, a silent guardian of memory and hope. From that point forward, Hachiko's legend only grew, transcending the borders of Japan to become a globally resonant tale. His story was translated into countless languages, published in books, and eventually adapted into films, both Japanese and international, reaching audiences across continents. Memorials and cultural representations of Hachiko began to appear far beyond Shibuya. Statues were erected in his birthplace of Odate, at the University of Tokyo, and even in cities abroad, each one a testament to the universal appeal of his story. His image adorned everything from postage stamps to children's books, becoming a powerful cultural touchstone. The atmosphere surrounding this enduring legacy is one of resilience, of unwavering spirit, and global resonance. The destruction and subsequent rebuilding of the statue underscore the indelible mark Hachiko left on the human heart. His story, a simple tale of a dog waiting for his master, speaks to the deepest human emotions: loyalty, love, grief, and hope. It reminds us of the profound connections that can exist between species, and the extraordinary power of unconditional affection. In the present day, the Hachiko statue at Shibuya Station remains one of Tokyo's most famous landmarks, a popular meeting point, and a constant source of inspiration. Tourists from around the world flock to it, taking photographs, leaving flowers, and reflecting on the story of the loyal Akita. His spirit,